John Paul Jones, the quiet and mysterious bassist and keyboardist of Led Zeppelin, sits in a dark room today. His face shows a mix of nostalgia and unease. For the first time in decades, he talks openly about his relationship with John Bonham, the powerhouse drummer who was both the band's beating heart and its most unpredictable force. Thoughts? Don't be afraid to face the hard truths about Bonham's brilliance, his demons, and the trail of strife that followed him on and off the stage. Remember how Led Zeppelin burst onto the music scene in the late 1960s? John Bonham was a drummer whose incredible force and technical talent changed the way rock drummers played. His thunderous rhythms on songs like When the Levee Breaks and Moby Dick wasn't just background music, they were the band's sound. They pushed their music to legendary proportions. But behind the drum kit was a man of contrasts on stage. Bonham was fierce and unstoppable on stage. Offstage, he was a complicated and unpredictable guy who inspired and drained those around him. His charisma and sense of humor made him a beloved friend, but his temper and impulsiveness also made him a cause of stress in the band. John Paul Jones remembers the dynamics within Led Zeppelin as a volatile mix of friendship and chaos. The band had a strong bond that was built on their meteoric rise to fame, but there were also tensions that threatened to tear them apart. John Bonham's fiery temper and stubborn perfectionism made as many problems as his booming drumming made their music great. One of the most common sources of stress was Bonham's intense need for accuracy while drumming was unmatched in strength and talent. His bandmates often had to work very hard to keep up with his constant search for perfection during rehearsals. Robert Plant, on the other hand, may feel like he was being smothered by Bonham's passion. Plant's free-spirited approach to music occasionally contrasted with Bonham's strict rules. Jones, who was usually the silent mediator, found himself in a tough spot trying to calm things down when Bonham and Plant's fiery personalities would erupt and threaten to set off these rehearsals, which were sometimes on the verge of mayhem. The tension was there but not spoken, and it was waiting for one mistake to set off an explosion. Bonham's fight with authority was another big problem that affected all of his relationships with the other band members. He didn't like being told what to do by producers, staff people, or even Jimmy Page was the band's very careful and frequently bossy guitarist. Page, whose need for perfection was as strong as Bonham's, often fought with the drummer. During studio sessions, their fights would start as small disagreements over tempo changes or how to play a song, would quickly turn into furious arguments. Page's calm but dominating approach just appeared to make things worse. Bonham's defiance was as much a sign of his pride as it was a sign of his anger at being handled, even in the close-knit dynamic of lead. Bonham's temper caused problems for the band, and his charisma and presence sometimes put him at the front of the band. On tour, Bonham's different personas sometimes made him angry with Plant's. Bonham's blazing passion and laid-back personality made for a volatile mix. Late at night, there were fights about everything from set lists to how people lived their lives. Each man was unwilling to back down from these fights, which sometimes ended in tears. This left a tension that lingered over the band like a storm cloud. Jones, ever the diplomat, remembers how he often felt stuck in the middle of these fights. His shy nature. He watched as Bonham's wild emotion clashed with his own. Bonham's stubbornness to compromise was both a sign of his artistry and a reason why the studio couldn't work together. What should have been times of creativity, synergy sometimes turned into fights of anger, as Bonham's strict rules collided with the band's drive to go forward. For Led Zeppelin, Bonham was both a blessing and a curse. He was the heartbeat of their sound, the drummer who took them to the top of rock music. But his mood swings, problems with authority, and inability to control his emotions frequently made him a difficult person to work with. Forced to manage the band's unity was a frail thread strained thin by the very fire that made Bonham a legend. Touring with Led Zeppelin was a maelstrom of energy and extravagance, with shows that were always sold out, arenas, deafening, roaring applause, and an exciting sense of invincibility. Yet for John Bonham, the relentless pace of life on the road didn't only stoke his inventiveness and feed his demons night after night. As the band rode the high of their incredible success, Bonham's love of excessive drinking began to throw a long, dark shadow over the euphoria. What started as a celebration often turned into anarchy, turning times of victory into tinderboxes of stress. Bonham's drinking binges became famous, but not for the appropriate reasons. His bandmates would drink every now and again to relax. Bonham's drinking regularly crossed the line between having fun and hurting himself. The intensity of the road and the pressure to do well appeared to push him into more and more nights of partying that often ended badly. Bonham's mood swings made the happy atmosphere much less so. More volatile, what could have been a night of laughter would change in an instant. A joke taken the wrong way, a tiny insult blown out of proportion, and suddenly the air was full of tension like a live wire. Wires in hotel rooms took the brunt of Bonham's anger, which had turned from luxurious retreats into scenes of destruction. Furniture was thrown around, walls were pounded, and TVs died too soon. People from outside these acts of destruction may have seemed like the crazy things a rock and roll star does when he's having too much fun, but to those who know Bonham, it was much more serious than that. His outbursts weren't just, "say things that show you're rebelling." They were calls for help that were hidden in the tumult of the moment. Arguments broke out often, driven by booze and the exhaustion of always being on the road. John Paul Jones remembers these nights very clearly, when the friendship they had created seemed to be on the verge of falling apart. Bonham might get angry very quickly over the simplest things, causing a chain reaction of stress in the band. Jones, always the diplomat, sought to calm things down in these instances. He sometimes found himself stuck between Bonham's fervor and the anger of his comrades. The most distressing part was how these events affected Bonham's relationships with the other band members, even as the music kept becoming better. With each tour, the dynamics got bigger. Bonham's behavior was strange. People around him started to worry about his behavior, turning what should have been times of celebration turned into times of worry behind the scenes. The band members' connection began to break down because Bonham was so unpredictable. The way to lead. For Bonham, Zeppelin was both a theater and a war, where his brilliance shone the greatest, but also where his problems were the most clear. The constant touring schedule made every part of his personality stronger. His brilliance, his intensity, and the stress he was under as the mile went on and the demands got harder. Bonham's life on the way turned into a ticking time bomb, was a threat that grew stronger with every step they went further into the chaos of their success. Bonham has a hard time with booze. Wasn't only a work issue, it got into every part of his life. His drumming showed that he was in charge and had mastered it. His personal life was a battleground where addiction often triumphed, and his connection with his family weakened as he dealt with the pressures of fame and the ways he learned to deal with them. Jones remembers times when Bonham would talk about how hard it was for him to be upfront about his feelings. His way of life was taking its toll on him. When the drummer's larger-than-life persona diminished, showing that he was struggling with his fears and the pressures of being a rock and roll star. However, these periods were short-lived because Bonham often hid behind his bluster and didn't want to or couldn't fully face his problems. John Bonham's drumming was more than just the beat, part of Led Zeppelin. It was the lifeblood of their music. Every thunderous rhythm and every intricate fill had a tenacity that pushed the band to new heights. Brilliance was there, but it also came with a strong sense of it. Affordable cost. Bonham's genius was more than simply a gift. It was a weight that he bore with such intensity that it affected not only him, but also everyone else in the band. Bonham's unique talent was both a gift and a problem. His skill in changing even the most basic possible, he turned rhythm into something amazing, which made him expected. He was irreplaceable, yet the same fire that powered his brilliance also burned too fiercely. His perfectionism, which pushed the band to greatness, also made things tense at times. A clear reminder that brilliance and change are often two sides of the same coin. John Paul Jones remembers these times with a mix of astonishment and tiredness, which is how Bonham was in the band. Bonham's legacy is a monument to the intricacies of genius. His drumming, raw and untamed, became the heartbeat of a period. Yet the same intensity that thrilled audiences around the world often left those closest to him spinning. John's reflections show the human side of the narrative of a guy whose strengths and flaws were so intimately linked that they became unbreakable. For every successful show, there was a moment of strain. For every new tune, the cost of Bonham's excellence stretched far beyond his music. His fiery nature and inner issues made for a dynamic that was both inspirational and tiring. June's story doesn't shy away from the painful truths that the same things that made Bonham great also made his life terrible. His journey is one of victories and struggles, as complicated and deep as the music he made. John Paul Jones's honest memories of Bonham are a sad reminder of the cost of being brilliant. Bonham's legacy is both a celebration of his unique gift and a sad look back at what it cost him. Led Zeppelin's music was legendary thanks to him. He was a force of nature who made their sound come alive. For those who traveled with him, his brilliance has been both a source of inspiration and grief over the years. Bonham's contributions have become immortalized in the annals of rock history, yet the price of that immortality remains a reminder of the fragility that often accompanies greatness. His life, as much as his music, continues to resonate. A story of brilliance, intensity, and the profound impact of a man who defined not just an era, but the very essence of rock and roll.